little bit lighter, but still a kind of pervasive concern that has not gone away since we started talking about this technology. When we originally brought it up, we had talked about ChatGPT kind of violating artists' rights a little bit, and how these companies were essentially scraping this data that was available online, claiming it was either public domain, and then throwing it into these algorithms so that it could produce X or Y output based on a prompt command. And it seems like now publishers are jumping on the train and taking a look at work that they've done and realizing, especially because news is so current, that there's no other way that this information is, especially if it's from, like, let's say something like an exclusive interview, could have gotten into the algorithm unless it wasn't scraped illegally. At least that's what they're claiming is happening. And they have, I think, a rightful concern, because there's a little bit of a 3-card Monte shell game trick that goes on with this. Because it is true that I think that these, in this personal opinion, that these algorithms can produce fully transformative work that takes its influences and then makes it unrecognizable or not harmful to the original copyright holder of the information that was input. But it can also produce almost the exact words back out again. And there is no way that that is being curbed by the current utilizations I've seen in the market. And it seems like now they've run up against a very powerful lobby that could very much affect, I think, the way that this current technology is interpreted. In fact, actually, it'll be interpreted under already existing law. And that makes it much harder, I think, for people who want to use this for things like coding or non-copyright infringing purposes. I think it will very much slow down the evolution of those uses if the creators of this content win. But ultimately, I'm kind of on their side, because how do you even get to having these tools in the first place if there's no incentive for the creators that make the content to create it, because it'll just be stolen in an instant. So those are kind of the main issues that I think are being brought up by this article. I don't want to go into the weeds on it, because I really kind of want to hear everybody's opinion on copyright and original works, and how we think this technology kind of faces up against creators' rights. Who wants to go first?
Well, it definitely causes you to question whether or not that's the right career field, knowing that if ChatGPT and all these other AI producing systems are out there, but also who's working on the back end to ensure that the accuracy is there, because whoever controls the algorithm ultimately controls the byproduct, which is coming out. So therefore, from a deception standpoint, they're able to manipulate that information in order to control the narrative or control the populace based off of the information that they want the populace to get versus what the actual truth is.
Well, actually, that's something that's interestingly happened. Not to go too deep into the Israeli conflict, but I know that people were sharing fake images online and had no clue that that image was completely produced by generative AI. So in terms of the input-output thing, these companies don't want to have the liability that the tool they made can actually produce dangerous output. And some of them have tried to mitigate that in ways by putting kind of safety rails on what you could prompt into the system. But, you know, humans are clever. We figure out ways to get around them. So, like, somebody figured out how to get a bot that was specifically trained not to give bomb instructions by putting it in more figurative language of, I'm writing a movie, I need to, you know, figure out how to dismantle a bomb in a scene. How is it connected so I could reverse engineer it? And there you go. Now the algorithm, because it has the information, is producing that result. So I think the companies that have made this technology were kind of hoping they could get a free pass on what it produces based on the way that other previous technologies around information collection were treated. Let's take Google, for example, scraping books, printed books, and then putting it into Google Reads. They would take excerpts and surface those excerpts if people were looking for them. It was found that that did not violate the original copyright holder's ability to commercialize their work. In this case, it seems like it does. And increasingly so over time, it's kind of harder to make the argument that it doesn't, as these companies are literally selling on the fact that we will replace jobs for you if you buy our tech.
Well,
right.
Well, going back to what you were talking about with Israel and the misinformation, disinformation, and fake images. Well, you look at the election, you look at what happened with the news recently. All the big news agencies jumped on board, said, hey, Israel attacked the hospital. Well, and in fact, it wasn't. It was Hamas rockets that caused that explosion and destruction and death. Not so being able to rapidly get the story out now is going to require additional vetting of that information before they can get that into the news feed, because they're not sure whether or not it's fake or not.
Well, so you're talking about kind of the quality of the input. It's interesting because this News Media Alliance is like, hey, they're stealing our original content and using it. And Mike's like, yeah. And both Mikes are like, yeah. And who knows what can come out of that, right? My concern is what is that news even saying in the first place? So, I agree 100%. We've seen deep fakes. We've seen misinformation, disinformation for years now. I think this is going to exacerbate it. In fact, I think, I forget which article I just saw on Apple News that Microsoft's AI is jacking up the news completely. So, kind of interesting times. But I think what this article gets to is this idea of stealing copyrighted works, whether those works are right, wrong, or otherwise good, bad, or even accurate, is a whole different issue, right? What it comes down to is attribution. Yeah. Because you can use that information as long as you say, this is where I got it from. And the problem is they're not doing that. They're just grabbing the information, using it, and throwing it out as, kind of their own, incorporating it into other works without kind of having that thread. Mike, I think we talked about this on the last show or 2 shows ago, that at least ChatGPT now, when it scrubs the internet, is giving you citations, references. So you can go back and look. That's a start. But it's up to the user to go back and look at that information, validate it, and then attribute it as well if they're going to actually incorporate it into whatever ChatGPT or whatever AI just did for them. Well, I don't know. Dan, what do you think?
It goes back to that proprietary information.
Yep.
And we saw in the music industry, whenever you had all the crowd sharing and
yeah, that's the example we brought up.
Yeah,
that was our original example.
So. Yeah, we talked about that. God, like what, a year ago, Mike?
But yeah, when this first came up. But go on, Michael.
I was just saying, if you haven't read it, the Spider and the Starfish really talks about those type of companies and that type of decentralized organizational theory, which allows for this type of stuff to happen. Now they've just automated it into AI, which instead of using people and groups and organizations to do it, they're just leveraging an algorithm to do it for them.
Well, they're ironically signaling the end of the open internet, because now it's not safe to create things openly, yeah. Right? So, Dan, what are your thoughts?
This is such a fascinating thing that we're grappling with here, and I absolutely agree with Don's point about just how critical attribution is, right? Because the business model for media outlets, of course, there's such urgency, right, to be first to break any given story, and sometimes the sources are missed some critical element, even if there wasn't any ill intent, right? But the reason that attribution I feel is so important is so that we can encourage people, right, to go back and think critically, to consider the source and start to draw likely a more balanced conclusion for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we're facing, I think, new issues based on this technology, because the technology is not fundamentally bad, right? It's neutral. It's how it was first utilized, how these companies felt it would be perceived, and I honestly, this all too often used ask for forgiveness later mentality, that, you know what, I'm going to say it for the first time, a feeling that's been bubbling up in me. This is a criminal mentality. And like on a base level, it is. And I think we need to retire that one. It served us well while the internet was kind of booming and web companies were growing, kind of this idea that we could replace things and disrupt them. All of that, I think, still stands and is valuable, but this thing has become kind of a gross kind of twist on itself. And attribution can be baked into this technology. There were outright statements that were false about it not being able to, because it seems like they're rolling out those features now. And I think that's ultimately going to be important if we're going to kind of renegotiate the information marketplace, because we can't go to a system where there's only these elite, verified, certified sources either. We've seen that fail time and time again, because any small contingency of people can be influenced. We all have our influences and biases, and that's why we need a free and open marketplace for information. So I think attribution is the only way to get to that, right? Where we can say, this came from this source is regularly correct on these issues, therefore I can trust it in this case. So that's it. We're out of time. We got to get going. Dawn's giving me the red flag, so she's gonna pull me off the stage with the cane. So Dawn, tell us a little bit about what's coming up.
Yeah, super quick. We're actually, I know it's Veterans Day coming up. We're in a crossover technologies month, meaning dual use, on the Dawn of Drones podcast. We got Air Agility coming up this Wednesday with Pramod, talking about his cool drones and what they're doing counter drone space. And then Thursday, we actually have an AI company. ASTN Group has created the Valmese Augmentive Artificial Intelligence Multi-Agent. Really interesting stuff on Clubhouse, and they'll be on the Dawn of Drones next week, so check that out. And thank you both for your service and for being on the show today. It was an awesome show.
Yeah, it was a great show. Want to thank both Dan and Michael for participating. Our sponsors, Centrix Air Vigilance, CSG Strategies, and Rubric Law for sponsoring the show. And again, thank you to the audience for participating. We appreciate all that you do for us. That's it. We are out here.